Good morning, everyone. Today's COVID topic is role of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine in COVID-19 management. So, there is large number of patients who have received off-label use of these experimental therapies like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, lopinavir, ritonavir, and remdesivir, etc. in the COVID-19 pandemic. So, the use of these drugs are mostly based on either their in vitro antiviral or anti-inflammatory properties. However, there is no clinical evidence currently to support efficacy and safety of any drug for the use of against coronavirus in humans, including SARS-CoV-2. Chloroquine is a 4-aminophylline. Chloroquine is 4-aminophylline group, which is basically an anti-malarial agent, which is and it's a heme polymerase inhibitor. With a chemical structure very similar to chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine is one of the disease-modifying anti-rheumatic agents. So they are widely used in rheumatologic diseases and have a strong immunomodulator properties. So the in vitro antiviral properties of chloroquine, they have been reported in early studies. They have to have a direct antiviral effects, inhibiting flavivirus, retrovirus, and many coronavirus. So chloroquine effectively inhibited SARS coronavirus infection 2 in the cellular level. However, there is no clear target of action. Given that hydroxychloroquine also demonstrates similar molecular mechanism to chloroquine, it's highly likely that HCQ also will perform similar to chloroquine. So this is a mechanism of probable mechanism of action of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. So probably they act at the first they interfere with the fusion of the viral particle to the ACE2 receptor, which is the receptor on the human cell, to which the spike protein of the coronavirus interact and causes the fusion of the viral protein. So they inhibit with this mechanism. So also inside the cell, they have multiple mechanisms. For example, like once the viral particle enters the cell, they'll combine with the lysosome and they form fusion particles. However, the chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, once they enter again into the lysosome, they increase the pH, thereby inhibiting the fusion of the viral particles. The viral so the subsequent viral infection and replication is affected. So also, like whenever there is a fusion and there is a release of viral proteins, they will be used up by the MHC cells to present it to the T cell, which is a subsequent reaction, and T cell will in turn produce cytokines like interleukin 1, 6, and TNF. So they also inhibit the antigen presenting and MHC class 2 mediated antigen presenting to the T cell, and they inhibit the subsequent T cell activation and cytokine production. The cytokine storm has been important for the pathogenesis of the disease, and chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are known to inhibit this cytokine storm. So they inhibit the binding to the membrane fusion by impairing the terminal glycosylation of ACE2 receptor. So they increase the pH of lysosomes, prevent the protease activity, so the fusion is impaired. So also they prevent the antigen processing and MHC class 2 mediated antigen presentation to the T cell. So also reduce T cell activation, differentiation, and cytokine production. So the adverse effects. So they have similar toxicity profile, although hydroxychloroquine is better tolerated and have lower incidence of toxicity. So the cardiac events like QTc prolongation and ventricular arrhythmias and cardiac deaths have been reported. Most common side effects are GI side effects like nausea and vomiting, hypoglycemia and rash have been reported. Retinopathy, bone marrow suppression usually occur with a long-term use. And it is less with the hydroxychloroquine. With chloroquine use, there is a greater risk of hemolysis in patients with G6PD deficiency. So whenever there is a use of chloroquine, the levels of G6PD are required. However, this is not required in patients who are given hydroxychloroquine. There is no need to test with G6PD deficient enzyme levels. Also, they don't cause hemolysis. So drug interactions are more important, like which drug drugs like antipsychotics, beta blockers, SSRIs, direct acting oral anticoagulants are digoxin, administered along with chloroquine. They have some drug interactions and the cytochrome mediated drug interactions. So when we searched the literature, there was only few randomized trials and few case series which which is on HCQ and chloroquine in COVID-19 patients. So robust studies are lacking, and we'll discuss a few trials which are available. So this is a study trial described from China. It's from Wuhan University. It's a randomized parallel group trial with a sample size of 62. They included patients more than 18 years with a milder disease, patients with severe critical illness, patients with already existing retinal disease, renal and liver disease are excluded. There was a standard 2 arms, the standard treatment arm plus HCQ arm compared to the standard treatment alone. However, the standard treatment is not very well defined. They're just mentioned as routine oxygen therapy, antiviral, other antibacterial, plus steroids and other things. But how much which was used in the complete data set is not available. The dose of HCQ was 400 milligram per day, that is 200 milligram BD for 5 days. So other parameters, the endpoints were like time to clinical recovery, the clinical characteristics and radiological results at baseline and after 5 days of treatment. So the results were compared to the control patients. The HCQ patients had 1 day shorter duration of fever, and 13% of the control patients experienced progression of disease, however none in the HCQ group, and 80% of the HCQ treated patients and 54% of the control patients experienced like moderate to significant improvement in CT scan. Adverse events were very mild, only one episode of rash and 1 headache in the group, none occurred in the control group. However, this study was limited, but there's a very sample size was less a small sample size, and the standard treatment was not very well defined, and distribution of other comorbid illness was also not described, and the patients were included also in the mild subset, which may improve with the natural course of the disease even without any intervention. And also the radiological improvement, like mentioned, like the radiologists were not blinded, so this could have lead to some potential bias. So the second trial is another study from China, like it's a pilot study to evaluate the efficacy and safety of HCQ in the treatment of patients with COVID-19. Sample size of 30, and patients were diagnosed with COVID-19 and treatment naive. They are randomized into 2 groups, the HCQ group and the control group. And here the HCQ was given as 400 milligram per day for 5 days. The primary endpoint was negative conversion in the pharyngeal swab on day 7 after randomization. So here there was no difference in the viral clearance in nasopharyngeal swabs on day 7 between both the arms. And 1 patient in the HCQ arm progressed to severe pneumonia. At follow-up, all the patients were improved. Side effects occurred in 4 patients in the HCQ group and 3 patients in the control group, and they had transient diarrhea and abnormal liver function. So other serious adverse events were not mentioned. So here also, like this randomization had a very smaller sample size, and the control group and other things were not very clearly defined, and they included patients with a milder subset. So how about combining hydroxychloroquine with azithromycin? This was the result of an open-label non-randomized clinical trial. This is from France. It included 26 patients with SARS with COVID-2, categorized as either asymptomatic or with URI or LRI, who received either HCQ 200 milligram 3 times a day for 10 days, compared to 16 patients who were controls. The controls were like the patients who refused the treatment, who did not meet the eligibility criteria, are from a different clinic. The primary endpoint was virological clearance at day 6 post-inclusion, and secondary outcomes were virological clearance over the time during study period, the clinical follow-up like temperature, respiratory rate, length of hospital stay and mortality, and occurrence of side effects. So 16% of the patients were asymptomatic in the group, and 61 majority were in the upper respiratory tract infection group, and 22% had LRTA, and all these LRTA cases had pneumonia and CT. So in the HCQ arm, 6 patients received azithromycin, like 500 milligram on day 1, followed by 250 milligram per day, and for next 4 days, totally 5 days. However, like what is the eligibility to receive azithromycin was not clearly mentioned in the study. So 6 patients in the HCQ group were excluded from the analysis. The reason being, 1 died, 3 patients were shifted to ICU. 1 patient stopped treatment due to nausea, and 1 patient withdrew from the study. So this is a basic characteristic of study population. The patients were subset was bit on the older in the HCQ group. The other clinical characteristics and the number of patients with mild asymptomatic URTA, LRTA were not significant between the both the groups. So the primary endpoint was the nasopharyngeal conversion, swab conversion. So by day 6, the PCR was negative in 14%, and 70% of the patients in a HCQ group, compared to only 12% in the control group. The p-value was significant. Among the HCQ group, so patients who received only HCQ, 57% had a negative swab. However, all the patients who were treated with chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin had a negative swab. However, the clinical outcomes for all the patients were not reported, and the potential risk of severe QT prolongation by the association of these two drugs were also not established in the study. The study is limited by a smaller sample size. The criteria for enrollment of cases and controls is unclear. Asymptomatic patients were enrolled. So also 6 patients were excluded in the HCQ arm, and the majority of these patients had a worse outcome. So if they were included in the final analysis, this group would have not performed so good. So no clinical outcomes. The clinical outcomes are not reported. It's basically only on swab conversion. Thus, the clinical significance of the negative swab is not known. And the reason for addition of azithromycin was in the patients were also only for 6 patients it was added. So the basis was not clear. So this is actually this is by same authors. It was a follow-up study of the previous study where they reported 80 cases, and 6 patients they included from the previous study. So 74 patients, 6 patients were included from the previous study. So here they gave it's a case series basically. So all the patients received HCQ 200 milligram 3 times a day for 3 to 10 days with azithromycin 500 milligram for day 1 followed by 250 for 4 days. So the outcomes were more clinical outcomes like oxygen therapy or ICU transfer for 3 days, the nasopharyngeal swab, culture, and the length of hospitalization. So in this subset, the 80 patients, 1 patient died and 3 patients required ICU transfer and 12 required oxygen therapy. So 65 patients improved well and they were discharged to home or transferred to other units for continuing treatment. So 14 patients remained was remaining in the hospital at the time of study results, and at the end of 6 days, 66% patients had a negative swab, and all the patients had a negative swab by day 12. Also, this is a case series. It's a case series. So the lack of control group, which is important because majority of the patients were of mild disease and they were discharged. 65 patients, and the selection of cases were also not clear. So there's a preprint version. Like also the discharge is not clear whether the patient is discharged to home or transferred to other centers or to other units were also not clear in this study. So this is a study. This is a small case series in 11 patients, and most of these patients were receiving supplemental oxygen at the initiation of treatment. So they were all treated with HCQ 600 milligram per day for 10 days and azithromycin 500 milligram on day 1 and 250 for 4 days. So this is a from this is a French study. So within 5 days, condition of 3 patients. So among 11, 3 patients worsened, 1 death, and 2 patients were shifted to the ICU. So adverse events, QT prolongation was noted in 1 patient, and this study reported like the nasopharyngeal swab clearance was 8 patient, 8 out of 10 patients remained positive in the swab at day 5 and 6. So this the previous all trials, most of the trials showing like nasopharyngeal swab conversion as early as day 6, and most of the patients received in 12 days. But in this study, like majority of patients remained positive. So they concluded there was no clinical benefit in the combination of HCQ and azithromycin in the treatment of hospitalized patients. And also this study, one study which included patients, majority of almost all the patients were in a little bit of severe subset. So as far as the QT interval prolongation is considered, this was a retrospective study performed in New York. So they included 84 consecutive patients who were hospitalized with COVID and were treated with a combination of HCQ and azithromycin. So 11% had a baseline coronary artery disease, and the baseline serum creatinine was 1.4, and 13% were requiring vasopressors. So regarding the concomitant drugs, 11% of the study group were on some neuropsychiatric drugs, and 8% were receiving levofloxacin, lopinavir, and ritonavir, or tacrolimus, which known to prolong the QT interval. So 4 patients died, but they did not have any arrhythmias. The mean baseline QT interval was 435 plus or minus 24 milliseconds, and the maximum mean QT interval was 463. The mean time to maximum QTC was 3.6 days, and ECG follow-up was done for a mean of 4.3 days. 11% of the patient developed a QT interval of more than 500 milliseconds. The baseline QTC was not a predictor of subsequent QTC interval during the therapy. In multivariate analysis, the acute kidney injury was a significant predictor of severe QTC prolongation. So coming to the National Task Force guidelines in the management of COVID, where do they stand on HCQ and azithromycin? So they indicate off-label use in patients with severe disease and who are requiring ICU management. So they recommend a HCQ dose of 400 milligram BD for day 1, followed by 200 milligram BD for 4 days in combination with azithromycin 500 milligram OD for 5 days. They should be administered under close monitoring with a monitoring of side effects, including QT interval. Not recommended for children less than 12 years, pregnant, and lactating. So these are some international bodies and their stand on the use of HCQ and or azithromycin, HCQ or chloroquine. So the CDC they recommend like chloroquine in patients for 500 milligram BD for 5 days in patients with URTA with a positive swab. And in COVID-19 pneumonia, they recommend they also recommend chloroquine. However, the Surviving Sepsis campaign doesn't recommend anything. There is quote the insufficient evidence to recommend the use of HCP or chloroquine in patients with critically ill patients. But the guidelines from Italy and Belgium, they have conditional recommendation for HCQ in patients with COVID. So what about the role of HCQ as a prophylaxis? So this is the National Task Force recommendation. The eligible individuals are asymptomatic healthcare workers and asymptomatic household contacts of lab confirmed cases. So in asymptomatic healthcare workers, 400 milligram twice a day on day 1, followed by 400 milligram once weekly for next 7 days. And the asymptomatic household contacts, 400 milligram twice a day on day 1, followed by 400 milligram once weekly for the next 3 weeks. So not recommended for under 15 years of age, and contraindicated in patients with pre-existing retinopathy, hypersensitivity to these drugs. So till now we have only few randomized control trials which are of small sample size and have methodological flaws and are also are in the preprint forms. So nothing has been conclusive. We don't know conclusive about HCQ or chloroquine, like the efficacy and So most of the trials, like they include the conversion of swab, but the translation of this into a clinical outcome is not reported. So the Solidarity trial by WHO, which includes the 5 arms like placebo versus like remdesivir, lopinavir/ritonavir with interferon beta 1 and chloroquine HCQ is awaited. So this may it's a large multicenter trial with a bigger sample size. So this might throw us some clear very clear role of HCQ and the chloroquine. So till then, like it's not like the evidence is not very strong to support the use of these drugs. However, in the context of any RCT, it can be used. And second thing is most of the trials, like except for few trials, none looked into the QTC prolongation and risk of cardiac death. Only few, 1 or 2 trials looked into the QTC prolongation. So this is also not very clear. Also, patients with pre-existing arrhythmias, like who develop COVID and go into a critical status, the role of HCQ and chloroquine is not much. So to conclude, data to support the use of HCQ and chloroquine are limited and inconclusive. So well-conducted RCTs are the only way to find effective and safe treatments. QTC prolongation, other cardiac toxicity and potential side effects, which pose risk to the patients who are already critically ill. So the overuse of HCQ has already caused some shortage in patients who really need this drug, patients with rheumatological diseases. So that may result in the flare-up of the disease without these drugs, and this may further put strain on the already like limited health resources. So the bottom line, like, the use of these drugs should not be given out in the, outside the context of a randomized controlled trial. And whenever such experimental drugs are drug without known efficacy is there, so we should provide a clear message with around the uncertainties using these agents in the current pandemic era, including the risk for serious adverse effects which these drugs may cause.